Okay, so to continue on, moving on to what are called fallacies. And fallacies are something that people believe to be accurate or to be true. It's like common knowledge when it's actually not true, or there are at least elements that are not true. Sometimes there are elements that are true. It depends on what you're talking about, but basically a fallacy is something that people believe to be true when in fact they're not accurate. It's not true. So an example of a fallacy you see right there: an apple a day keeps the doctor away is not actually true. It seems to make sense because apples are good for you, but it's actually, honestly, that one comes from an ad campaign to sell apples because the only thing they were using apples for at the time was to make cider and drinks and stuff like that, and they didn't have enough of a market for apples, so that was part of it, to try and get apple sales to increase. So you can see how what we think is true can grow into a giant misconception and widely held belief in a way. But I guess nobody actually thinks that it's going to keep the doctor away, but at least they kind of believe it in a way that it's like a healthcare thing. Anyway, moving on to the actual economics one. So fallacy of composition. So this is where you have the idea that either way, something that's good for one group of people is going to be good for everybody, or something that's good for everybody is going to be good for an individual. So the example here, you've got so NAFTA, is good for certain segments of the economy, has a lot of benefits, but it also has drawbacks to a lot of things. Same thing with you see the picture of corn. So corn in the United States is a heavily subsidized product, and what they did is they were trying to help corn sales and corn farmers, and so they basically paid corn farmers for an elevated price for their product, and the result of that policy actually had more farmers growing more corn, so they ended up with a higher surplus of corn than they had before because it was more profitable for farmers to switch from whatever they were making or growing to suddenly grow corn because of this program that was designed to help out other corn farmers. And now, of course, if you look at the amount of products that have corn elements in it, it's actually quite amazing. But basically, that's where that comes from. And so the idea that the politicians sell, the constituency on is that their program is going to work for everybody, when in reality, that's just not going to happen because there's going to be exceptions. In some cases, when you pander to one particular group of people, that's going to end up being detrimental, economically speaking, or even in other ways to the whole. Okay. Second one is called the post hoc fallacy. Okay, so that's the idea that something that happened right before another event is the direct cause of that event. So the rooster crowing in the morning is what causes the sun to come up. So if you didn't have the rooster, the sun wouldn't come up. That's an example of that kind of fallacy. We know that's not true. You don't need a rooster to make the sun go up, but that's the same kind of logic. Because the sun comes up as the rooster crows, people can then associate one with the other. So that's the idea of when they have economic downturns, or they have even when things are going really well. Again, politicians will point to their policies as being the main reason for that particular upswing in the economy, or they'll blame the previous government for the downturn in the economy. Really, it's a very complex story most of the time of why the economy is going up or down. Sometimes it has nothing to do with government policies at all. And government policies and a lot of economic policy in theory actually take a couple years to, or at least half a year to actually get in motion. So you don't usually see the effects of government's policy until further down the road. So when they enact a policy and then a couple weeks later things go up in terms of growth, then they claim that there was their particular program, when most of the time it's not, because their program hasn't had its effect as of yet. Okay, next one is the fallacy of single causation. So that's just that's the simplistic argument that the cause of a particular problem, or the in the opposite, a particular benefit is from one particular action. Again, is just being too simplistic. Obviously, there are multiple reasons behind why things happen. So, for instance, you see the image there that they're showing that the guns are the problem in this particular cartoon. But the cartoon is saying that the entertainment industry has, plays a role in that. Whatever. It's just an idea of things that are much more complex. So, gun control and gun violence and stuff have lots of different issues and different reasons why they happen. You look at between Canada and the United States. The United States has a huge problem with gun violence, and so therefore it's got to be part of their culture and part of the way that they've set up their society, versus Canada, which doesn't have as big an issue at all. So there's a bunch of reasons in there. It's not just one particular thing. It's not just one video game that was released, one year, and then there's a spike in gun violence. It's not necessarily because of that video game. It could be a whole bunch of other host of reasons. So to be, a little more simplistic, or a little more lighter hearted about it, you could talk about they have you watch a hockey game or something like that, and they talk about the TSN turning point. And what always irks me about those is they always show like the winning goal as the TSN turning point, or the tying goal. Like, okay, well, yeah, fine, that's what actually won the game, that goal, but there's a whole lot of other things that went on, to make that win possible. So it's just the idea of a simple, single explanation for a particular event, which, is not the case. Things are much more complex than that. Okay, the last one is the broken window fallacy. So the question I asked at the very beginning for you to think about is some people, again, you have arguments that say that natural disasters are actually good for the economy because it creates all the jobs to do cleanup and everything like that, when really that's not true. Because if you just think of a broken window, right? That's why you call it a broken window fallacy. Now you think about a broken window that you have to fix in your house. Sure, that just created, a job for, if you hired it out to the window company to replace it, it caused them to sell another window at whatever store you bought it at, or whatever. But really, what's happened is money that you were going to use for something else has been diverted to that window. No new money has actually been created there. So no actual extra economic activity has actually happened there. So, for instance, when you have like a hurricane disaster, and they go in and they spend lots of federal money to clean up the area and to help the people build their lives up again, and people will point at and look at all the economic activity. Yes, it is creating activity there, but what it's doing is drawing away from something else they would have spent that money on. So maybe instead of having to rebuild houses, they would have spent it on a healthcare program, or they would have spent it on tax incentives, or they would have spent it on some kind of trade deal or something like that. It's just diverting funds from another place. And if they don't divert funds, if it is new money, then they're taking away from future earnings because they're now borrowing more money. So in no way does a disaster create new opportunities. It just diverts focus, and it diverts resources away from that particular or to that particular disaster, and away from other programs. Anyway, okay, so hopefully that was informative. I'm going to try different ways to get this information out to you guys. And just if you have any comments or anything like that, want something to let me know. Hopefully fairly positive, but any feedback would be good. Okay, talk to you later. Bye-bye.